Hi, this is John from SuperSteer, and today we're going to install a set of the rear wheel spacers, the SuperSteer rear wheel spacers on a Chevy Duramax pickup. And the reason we recommend this is the rear ends on these trucks are about 4 inches narrower than the front end. So what happens when you install these spacers, your rear wheels are running in the same track width as the front, so you get less rut tracking and wander, and also it makes the vehicle more stable because you're widening out that wheel track. And we want to show you here real quick on this truck. We put some tape measures from side to side, and if you look at the rear distance, we're sitting about 74¼ inches on the rear, and then if we go to the front, we're about 78½ inches from side to side. So once we put these spacers on, we're going to improve the handling of the truck and the look of the truck as well. This is our before shot. If you look at the tire versus the fender well spacing, we just wanted to get a shot of this before we start here so you can see the before and after. So that's what we're showing here. Okay, in order to do the install, we've got the truck on level ground, it's in park, and we've got the brake set. I'm going to go ahead and block the front wheels because we are going to be lifting the back of the truck up off the ground. Always a good idea to block the opposite side you're working on so it can't roll away from you. We're going to go ahead and jack up the rear end now here on this right rear wheel, positioning it underneath the rear end housing. Now that we have it lifted up, I'm going to go ahead and place a safety stand underneath the rear end. You never want to rely on a hydraulic jack, because if it blows a seal or starts to leak, it can come down on you. So always want to use some kind of a safety support. Now that we're ready to start working, I'm going to go ahead and put my safety glasses on for eye protection. Don't want to forget that. We'll start off here by pulling this outer hubcap off. This is just plastic covering. Okay, so we've got that loose. Okay, on this GM truck, the lug nut size, they are metric, and it's a 22 millimeter. So we're going to go ahead and pull the wheel off. You always want to be careful with air wrenches that you don't run the nuts off and tear the threads up. Air tools make it a lot easier, a lot faster, but you do have to be careful with them. Okay, now that we've got the wheel off, it's a good time to look at the condition of the brakes. This is a rear wheel disc brake truck, so we can see the pads real easily. Rotors are a little rusty. Pads do have quite a bit of material left on them. Now, one thing I want to point out here is the factory uses these small clips here to hold the rotors on in the assembly process. We are going to want to remove those. We want to have a nice flat surface that we're putting our spacer up against. So we'll go ahead and take those clips loose. They come off fairly easily. It looks like we just have 2 of them on there. Okay, now that we've removed these little retainer clips, we're going to go ahead and clean this surface off here so we've got a nice flat surface to bolt to, and make sure we don't have any debris in here or anything that might cause a problem with our spacers to sit flat on this surface. Okay, these spacers come with all the lug nuts that you'll need to bolt them on. And this is a metric style on this particular GM truck. You can see the spacer is about 2 inches wide. It's made from solid billet aluminum. It's a nice machine piece. The studs are all pressed in tight into it. going to go ahead and put our spacer on. I'm going to make sure that it's sitting nice and flush, that it's not rocking or anything. That looks good. And we're going to go ahead and put our lug nuts that came with the spacer. You most likely will need a thin wall socket to get inside of this spacer to tighten it. Once we get these evenly snugged up, we're going to torque them down. In this particular truck, we're going to torque them, it's about 140 foot-pounds. And you want to try to do it in an even crossing pattern. I'm going to grab my torque wrench here. And we'll set it to 140 pounds. 140, and we'll lock it down. Okay, after we've gone around, we've done our crossing pattern, let's go around one more time and we'll just hit each one, make sure that we've got them all, we haven't missed any. Better to be safe than sorry. So we've got them all torqued to 140. Looks good, nice and flush. Now we're going to put the wheel back on. Before we put the wheel on, we're going to make sure that this surface is clean, that we don't have any debris or anything here that might cause us to not torque up properly. It looks good. So now we're going to put the factory lug nuts back onto the spacer studs. Okay, now that we've got those snugged up, we're going to go ahead and torque these down. These are the factory lug nuts to the spacer. We're going to go ahead and torque these to 140. And now we're going to go around, just make sure we've got them all tight. We haven't missed any. Okay, now rather than putting the hubcap on right now, what we recommend with these spacers is to drive the vehicle about 30 miles, come back, jack it up, pull the wheel off, and recheck your torque on the inner spacer. Retorque them to 140 pounds, put your wheel back on and torque it to 140 and you're good to go. Okay, let's go ahead and do the driver's side now. The main reason we want to use the lug nuts that we supply with our spacers versus the originals, you can see the originals have the threaded outside edge on them to hold the hubcaps on, and these don't. And our tapers are matched to our spacer, so that's why we're using our lug nuts to hold the spacer on, even though they are the same thread pattern. So after we've gone around and torqued them, let's go around one more time to be sure we've got them all. Now we're going to go ahead and torque them down to 140 pounds on these original lug nuts. Bolting the wheel to the spacer now. Now here again, we're going to leave the hubcap off for now because we want to drive the truck about 30 miles, see how it handles. When we get back, we're going to jack it up. We're going to pull the wheels off again and re-torque the spacers, make sure they're staying tight, and then we'll go ahead and put the wheels on and torque them, and we'll be done with it then. So we want to get a shot of how the truck looks from the back now with the spacers on as well. Okay, now as you can see, we have the spacers installed, and notice the difference between the fender weld of tire clearance. It looks a lot better, and it's going to handle a lot better too in the ruts. The front and rear tires are going to be running in the same path, so they won't be fighting the ruts as much. Also, if you have a camper or anything like that where you need stability, the truck's going to handle a lot better, corner a lot better, and be more stable as well. Okay, now that we've done our 30-mile test drive, we're going to re-torque our wheel spacers. So we'll go ahead and jack the truck up and get started on that. And we'll put our safety stand under there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and re-torque the spacer. We've got it set at 140 pounds. Just go around here and make sure we're all good and snug. So far, so good. Alright, no movement on any of them. That's good. So now we can go ahead and put our wheel back on and re-torque it. Put our hubcaps on, we'll be ready to go. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and torque these down to 140. Okay, now we're ready for the hubcap. Okay, now that we've got the wheel torqued, go ahead and put our hubcap back on. These are just plastic nuts, so it really doesn't take much they kind of lock in place. You can feel them. Doesn't really take much pressure on them at all. Alright, so we'll move around to the other side now. Alright, that finishes that up. We make these spacers for, basically they're the 8-on 6.5 bolt pattern for 3/4 and 1-ton Dodge, Ford, and GM trucks. The GMs do have 14mm on the later model ones with disc brakes. Their earlier ones were 9/16, but that bolt pattern, basically all these trucks, the rear end was about 3 3/4 inches, 4 inches narrower than the front, so that helps bring that wheel track out to match the front. Thank you for your time today.